I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
This is a significant achievement that potentially pulls Iran, Israel, and the region back from the brink.
The UN pushes for nuclear talks amid a pause in the fighting between Israel and Iran.
We are witnessing a breakdown in the basic protections each of these children are owed.
Focusing on the youngest victims of conflict, a debate on the protection of children.
You have to take peace and security, development, and human rights together, hand in hand.
Pakistan's ambassador outlines priorities as his country prepares to assume leadership of the Security Council. Next.
Tensions in the Middle East region remain a key concern for diplomats here at UN headquarters. They continue to stress the need for diplomatic solutions.
The ceasefire agreement is an opportunity to avoid a catastrophic escalation and achieve a peaceful resolution of the Iran nuclear issue.
Under Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs Rosemary DiCarlo was among the diplomats applauding an announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran. For nearly 2 weeks, the two countries had traded attacks sparked by Israeli strikes in Iran. The U.S. also entered the conflict targeting key Iranian nuclear facilities. Some members of the Security Council called for a revival of the 2015 multilateral Iran nuclear deal that fell apart after the U.S. withdrew in 2018. Here's China's UN Ambassador Fu Tong.
To start dialogue and negotiation is the fundamental way forward. China supports all efforts to relaunch the Iranian nuclear negotiations and believes that this is also the position of the vast majority of Council members.
Xu Deja is monitoring developments inside the UN and has more on our top story. Deja.
Yes, Elaine. This week has been packed, but we're going to just focus on two major developments: the tensions between Israel and Iran and the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter. Let's start with the Israel-Iran situation. It's been an exceptionally dramatic week. So dramatic, in fact, that all of us had to rush back to this very building on a Sunday afternoon to cover an emergency session of the Security Council convened after the U.S. launched strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. The debate was so heated, and not just because the air conditioning was out in our office on a Sunday afternoon, it was so heated that the president of the Security Council had to remind delegates to watch their language.
Before opening the floor, I would like to remind all speakers that this is a formal meeting of the United Nations Security Council and of the need to ensure proper decorum in the delivery of their statements and to refrain from personal attacks.
Once again, the internationally wanted war criminal Netanyahu succeeded in hijacking U.S. foreign policy, dragging the United States into yet another costly, baseless war.
Many nations here in this room engaged in diplomacy with determination and good faith. But the regime in Tehran had other plans. It used the negotiating table as camouflage, a delay tactic, a way to buy time while building missiles and enriching uranium.
I spoke with both Israeli Ambassador Denis Denoun and the spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, asking whether the U.S. strikes had made the region any safer. And here's what they told me.
One very simple question. Do you think after this operation, Israel is safer now?
Absolutely. Not only Israel. I think the entire world is safer.
Is Middle East a safer place after the U.S. used the force?
The more we see unilateral use of force, the more we see violations of international law, the riskier the region gets.
Then Iran retaliated with strikes on a U.S. military base in Qatar. Not long after the Secretary General released a statement expressing his concern, things shifted again, dramatically. President Trump announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, and Secretary General Guterres obviously welcomed this move.
Secretary General urges the two countries to respect that ceasefire fully. The fighting must stop, he said, as the people of both Israel and Iran have already suffered too much. The Secretary General hopes that this ceasefire can be replicated in the other conflicts in the region.
China's permanent representative Fu Tong called on all parties to honor the deal.
We hope the ceasefire could hold and could be abided by faithfully by all parties. No more deceptions this time.
And now onto the UN Charter. 80 years ago, on June 26th, representatives from over 50 countries signed the Charter of the United Nations. That day is now celebrated as the UN Charter Day. And the original charter signed in San Francisco is now currently on display here at the UN headquarters. The UN Charter is not just the founding document of this organization, it's the cornerstone of modern international law. On Monday, Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the President of General Assembly, Philemon Yang, officially opened the exhibit and were among the first to view it.
To lay the foundations for a global order that will spare future generations from the catastrophe of war, a global order rooted in international cooperation and the unwavering belief in universal human dignity, an order in which the principles of multilateralism are respected and upheld. The charter you see on display is the result of that promise.
Then on 26th, the General Assembly held a commemorative meeting marking the Charter's 80th anniversary.
Follow when the Charter suits, ignore when it does not. The Charter of the United Nations is not optional. It is not an à la carte menu. It is the bedrock of international relations. We cannot and must not normalize violations of its most basic principles.
Well, that's all from me. Back to you, Elaine.
Shidajah, thanks. Around the world, there are more armed conflicts now than at any time since World War II, and children are significantly affected. From the loss of education opportunities to physical and emotional harm, thousands of young people are even recruited as child soldiers. More children were killed or maimed last year than at any time in the last 2 decades. Here's a special representative for children in armed conflict and UNICEF's Director of Child Protection and Migration.
The year 2024 marked a devastating new record. The United Nations verified 41,370 grave violations against children, a staggering 25% increase compared to 2023.
Children are not collateral damage. They're not soldiers. They're not bargaining chips. They're children, and they deserve to be safe. They deserve justice. They deserve a future.
More than 23 million people in Afghanistan are in need of assistance. This week, the Security Council received a briefing on the UN's mission in Afghanistan. 4 years after the Taliban regained control, the country faces increasing levels of hunger and poverty. And there are stark concerns for the trajectory of women and girls. Here's Seema Bahus, Executive Director of UN Women.
Nearly 78% of Afghan women aged 18 to 29 are neither working, nor studying, nor training, making Afghanistan home to one of the widest and fastest growing gender gaps in the world.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
Desperate, hungry people in Gaza continue to face the inhumane choice of either starving to death or risk being killed while trying to get food.
That's the spokesperson for the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The agency says more than 400 Palestinians have reportedly been killed by Israeli forces near food distribution sites in the last month. The UN is calling for independent investigations into the incidents. A new report from the World Meteorological Organization shows Asia is warming twice as fast as the global average. The rate of warming on the continent shows no signs of slowing down. Tobacco use claims more than 7 million lives every year. But the WHO says 155 countries have implemented anti-tobacco measures, covering more than 3/4 of the global population.
Coming up.
Not enough is being done to address all those challenges that are before us.
UN Insider.
All you need to know about China. China 24, only on CGTN.
Pakistan joined the United Nations in 1947. The country will serve as Security Council president for the month of July. I sat down with Pakistan's UN ambassador, Asim Iftikhar Ahmad. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are leading the Security Council at a time of ever-changing and intensifying volatility. Can you tell us more about your priorities for July?
These are indeed very challenging times. Our main priority is to give that importance to the multilateral system that we have in place, to prioritize the actions, collective actions of the international community through the UN and all the mechanisms and all the principal organs of the United Nations. So we believe that only through collective actions, only through effective multilateralism, we can address the many challenges that are facing the international community right now.
You arrived to this posting fairly recently, but you have deep experience within the UN system, Human Rights Council, SCAP, UNESCO. You've also served as a diplomat in Asia, Africa, Europe. What do you bring to the Council, your experience, your perspectives?
I think it's the collective experience of Pakistan as a country, of Pakistan's diplomacy, as a voice of the developing countries, of Pakistan's diplomacy and efforts throughout the years in upholding the international law, in upholding and taking forward the principles and purposes of the Charter of the United Nations, and working across the three global pillars of the UN, that is peace and security and development and human rights. I believe that Pakistan has played that role of engaging our partners in the international community. We work across divides, so we know what it takes to build bridges, to work on convergences, how to address differences. And that, I think, is the spirit and the beauty of what we do at the UN. So we will continue to do that. That's our goal and aspiration. And we utilize every opportunity that is afforded to Pakistan, whether as a member of the Security Council or other organizations, to play that role for the global good.
Is your assessment one of optimism given this ever-changing, seems by the hour, the minute, the day, conflicts around the world seem to get worse?
Yes, I think there are many developments that lead us to believe that not enough is being done to address all those challenges that are before us, whether it's in the realm of international peace and security, that there are issues, there are ongoing conflicts, Gaza is burning. Now we have this situation between Iran and Israel. A couple of weeks back, you saw there was a grave situation in our own region in South Asia between India and Pakistan. We were subjected to unlawful, unprovoked aggression. So these are very serious issues which are there. Similarly, on the development side, we had this big agreement on the SDGs, and we have the Pact for the Future. There are so many important agreements that the international community, the member states have agreed to on climate, the Paris Agreement and all of that. But there are setbacks. There are voices that are raising different opinions. Some are suggesting to go back on these global agreements. So these are negative trends. But I think on the positive side, we should have some optimism. We should have this confidence in the international system that is there in place, because when you look at it, despite all these challenges, despite all these difficult circumstances which sometimes divide the membership, the majority of the membership, the UN member states, they have been able to overcome these differences and to come together. So I believe that the majority of the membership has great trust in the UN and in the value of the multilateral system, and that's why you see that the UN remains so busy.
Very recently, Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced this proposal for major reform, this overhaul of the United Nations called the UN 80 initiative. I want to get your thoughts. On one hand, there are so many issues, but what he is asking are for major cuts across this body and moving the UN into the next 80 years.
I think to better understand this, it would be good to recall that reforms or major reform initiatives, this is not something new in the history of the UN. So UN is an evolving organization, and our objective is to have this organization adapt to the requirements, to the changing realities, to the emerging challenges. That means you have to adapt, you have to reform. And the objective is to have an organization that is fit for purpose, that is leaner, more efficient. So we see that going forward, this will not weaken but strengthen the UN. We also see that, and this is how the Secretary General has explained, that this reform initiative is not just a reaction to the budgetary constraints. It is something that UN needed in any case.
What are your reflections as the United Nations marks its 80th anniversary?
80 years have passed since we established this organization. There are many new things that this organization is addressing. You have the AI, you have the emerging technologies, you have so many things, so many challenges across the whole spectrum that the UN is trying to address. But the beauty of it, and this is something that the member states are increasingly discussing these days, that the charter that is there, this little booklet with all its articles, it's so well written. It has everything there still about human rights, about development, about peace and security, about the responsibilities of the Security Council and the General Assembly, that there is now, I see this very strong tendency for the member states to go back to this charter and to see, what is there, how we can better implement those provisions and those articles of the charter, which are so clearly well written, futuristic, which are still relevant, and which provide us these mechanisms which we can, if we come together, we can still continue to effectively and very efficiently utilize to promote our common and shared objectives for peace and security and development and the promotion of human rights.
Master Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
UN Insider.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights from the region and beyond.
Go green. It's a phrase we often hear when it comes to making sustainable choices to improve the environment. Colombia's second largest city is embracing that concept by giving its urban landscape a makeover designed to fight climate change.
Throughout Medellin, there are hundreds of green spaces popping up, curb strips, squares, and parks. They begin to somewhat crawl up the outer buildings through vertical gardens. Even this old bridge for pedestrians was converted to be one big flower pot instead of being torn down. This has been described by some as urban acupuncture that makes a big impact. These small interventions are very carefully planned with the help of botanists who are thoughtfully choosing plants that will also provide food for wildlife.
Putting plants that really attract wildlife. Many parts attract butterflies and bees, because we also want our corridors to attract mammals and birds. But what we plant is very important because these corridors provide food for birds, nesting grounds, and a shelter where they can feel protected.
At the launch of this project in 2016 to 2019, more than 450,000 individual plants were added to roads and parks. Another 12,500 trees were planted. In 2020 to 2023, another 10,000 trees and 350,000 plants were planted. The Botanical Garden also emphasizes the importance of the reintroduction of native and endemic species. This is a library of native plants found in the tropical Andes Mountains. When the project first began, only 30% of Medellin's plants were originally from this region. The other 70% were plants that were brought from faraway places like Europe. With the help of reintroduction of native plants, that number was inverted by 2020. The Botanical Garden says this helps reestablish a balanced web of life.
Hay plantas que atraen cierto tipo de murciélagos.
I have a plant that easily adapts to its environment. It is going to grow well and will attract a bat, and that bat will eat insects at night. Look at how it provides equilibrium to our environment. Of course, there are other benefits like lowering temperatures, but we need to open our mind to other benefits. This is a system that is part of an interconnected network. Bringing back balance will give us a much more resilient green city, much more harmonious with development, and this will permit more favorable living conditions.
What has made the most headlines is that all this work is bringing down climate temperatures. Medellin was suffering from severe urban heat island effect, meaning the temperatures in the city were rising when compared to the surrounding suburban and rural areas. According to the United Nations Environment Program, concentrations of concrete and black tarmac roads absorb the sun's heat and then radiate it back out, keeping cities hot way after the sun sets. The green spaces have a cooling effect. They reduce the amount of concrete that is constantly absorbing and radiating heat. It also provides cooler space for citizens to take refuge from the direct sun. Medellin's City Hall claimed the project had reduced temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius since 2018.
If you stand in an area where it is full of concrete and sidewalks and pavement, you will have the sensation of heat. You can actually measure that. And if you change to a spot a few meters away with vegetation and gardens, you will feel the temperature drop.
Downtown, Medellin's City Hall stands proudly, displaying the largest vertical garden in the city. The 1,810 square meters of wall is home to more than 100,000 plants, architectural choices that can be found in the private sector as well.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.